All right, welcome back from your break. We are going to now kick off this next section with another amazing panel. And it's all about using Web3 insights to design e-commerce engagement for the Omniverse. Our moderator is Stambor. He's a senior analyst at Insider Intelligence. He oversees a team covering retail and e-commerce and contributes to the Reimagining Retail podcast. His panelists joining him are Stephen Moy, the CEO of Barbarian. He's worked on large-scale digital transformation and world-recognized initiatives for global brands, including Amex, McDonald's, Marvel, Shiseido, Johnson & Johnson, CVS Health, LVMH, Samsung, and AT&T. Claudine Patel is the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Marketing for Sanofi. She has over 25 years of progressive global experience in the consumer goods and healthcare industry. So take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks for that very nice intro.
Okay. So Steve's the smart one, and I am not.
No, it's not true. I just like to talk, that's all.
Yeah, we're just along for the ride.
We
yeah.
We are accessory today. Yes.
So let's just start the conversation by talking about Web3. And the description for this session has the very provocative question of, is Web3 dead? But before we even get there, I think we need to just define very briefly and in very plain English, like how we're defining Web3, because I think if I ask like every single person in here how they define it, they'll each have a separate definition.
Oh yeah, so you want me to go first? Yeah, okay. So the way I look at Web3, I've been working, don't let me fool you, I've been working over 30 years in the industry. So Web3, my definition is a bundle of new technology innovations that created an extra dimension, allow different type of ownership, meaning data, and also decentralization. And this new wave of innovation actually created what I call Omniverse. Right? We're already doing online, go to physical store. Like for example, I would never buy jeans online unless go try it on. I'm not having a perfect body. So when metaverse came along, it's one application of Web3, and our consumer journey got deconstructed completely. So that's what we call Omniverse.
Yeah, and so for me, I think it's really simple because I'm still on the journey of learning. My background is I go into companies and we drive transformation, right? We have to fix the basics while we think about long-term growth and bringing our brands into culture. So for me, the idea of Web3 is really an evolution of how we use the internet. I was just talking to Zach about the days where I grew up, which was DOS, right? And that was maybe 1-2 dimensions around the internet and the web. And now, I'm using it specifically. My understanding of it is it's a lot of test and learn. It's a lot of driving towards more immersive experiences. And then how do I use those experiences to table it back to building brands, building what I call fans of your brands, and then building as well capabilities that could drive our consumers and shoppers online and offline. So to me, it's an evolution of the web and how we use it. I'm looking at it from a more practical lens, and any of you that can help me figure that out too would be awesome.
I think it's such a good point because it is such early days. As I said just a few moments ago, it's like nobody has this figured out. We're all on a journey. But let me ask that very provocative question. Is Web3 dead even though we are still in those early days?
I don't think it's dead. I think the media perpetuates something that, in terms of being very narrow focused on what Web3 is all about, like for a time I think we were talking about the metaverse, and then we talked about how companies like Disney, even Gucci are pulling out, LVMH are pulling out of their investments towards investing behind the metaverse. That's just one component of Web3, right? So the idea of Web3 being dead, it's not. I think people are just trying to figure out what that is and what that means, at least someone like myself. And so for me, it's really important to continue to test and learn, to stay relevant, and to truly decipher or to deconstruct the elements of the web for me to be able to use it to drive my brands.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're also witnessing Web 2.5, right? Somewhere in between, with Apple launching the VR/AR goggle and Snapchat doubling down on the AR/VR experiences. I think we eventually get to the utopia of Web3, but I think go back to the way I explain to all my clients is your targeted digital customer journey completely deconstructed and put it back together now with Web3 coming along, meaning back to the Omniverse. So just like we talk about it, right, professionally, personally, you go in and out of your different roles. And just like metaverse, you know, if they still exist, that's a space for different purpose. We just haven't identified the right use case. That's why you see a lot of ups and downs, like NFT and metaverse. And so my company recently did a research, right? About 1.6 billion people in the world, including autism, has physical constraints. So in some cases, the digital-enabled virtual world makes sense when you have physical constraint. That could be a starting point. But if you look at the holistically, we still try to figure out how it makes sense. I think go back to the golden rules, right? Are you adding value to your target audience? Is there something differentiated that your brand should be doing? And more importantly, for a lot of brands, can you unlock more growth? Right? If not, that's why you see a lot of initiative, you know, faded, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, like, who remembered playing King Quest, you know, right? Like, to me, King Quest and Dungeons and Dragons, they all came together. It was this whole idea of search your own adventure. To me, that was my metaverse in those days. And then I became a big fan of all these, you know, create your own adventures. And I started buying all these books and spending a lot of money as a kid. And so for me, to me, this is an evolution of how we think about retail through the lens of Web3, which is you create all these immersive experiences to help drive kind of your passion points on what you love, and then through that consumerism happens, right? So that's kind of how I deconstruct, you know, the metaverse. So I think it still exists, it's just a different form.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to ask a very broad question, and you can kind of take it wherever you want to go. But so how can marketers optimize their current e-commerce strategy to unlock growth and actually enhance the customer experience?
You want me to go first?
Well, I think you probably have more varied experiences around that.
I do.
And then I can probably talk about my problem areas.
So I look at the Web3 expanded Omniverse. I think with the ownership, I talk about two things, right? Web3 introduced ownership, new type of ownership, especially with data, and also decentralization. I think if I were the brand, I've been talking about this for the last 10 years. Direct to consumer is a boardroom conversation. You know, you have to have a direct relationship with your consumer. I'm talking about you still work with your ecosystem partner, the Amazon, the CVS, the Walmart. But the younger generation, especially today, half our population in the US is Gen Z, right, under 30. They want to talk to the brand. They want to talk to them. So I look at this new decentralization ownership, I think having direct-to-consumer mindset, setting up new direct-to-consumer conversation, you can capture a lot of new data. There's so many new data. IBM estimated a couple of years ago, they told me 90% of the world new data came from the last 4 years. So you should capture, especially with cookies going away, right? Capture first-party data and single-party data. And then you stitch them together and make something more insightful and truly bring to the utopia you want to do. Including brands.
I'm going to actually bring a real-life example where I've worked with Steven before and tell you what happened after that, which I think were lessons learned. So I don't know, you know, so when I was a record and when I was working on the Mucinex brand, you know, live stream was all the rage in China, less so in the US. And so for me, sometimes I like to look outside of the US to look for kind of inspiration around how do we think about technologies, because China, Japan, I think areas like that, sometimes they're a little bit more, you know, I would say future forward in the way they experiment. And so I wanted to pull live stream as a commerce concept with my brands. And that's when we launched Sickwear,
Yes.
which was, you know, we worked with designers during COVID to build comfortable clothes and bundle it with our products and sold it on a live stream platform, live stream capability. Now, we did that at the infancy of live streaming in the US, okay? So what I appreciated about that is I got a lot of flack for it because, you know, it wasn't driving a lot of revenue, to be honest. It was out of what pharma companies would typically do, and fashion and medicine has not a lot of things in common. I don't know if you guys noticed. So there were a lot of things that was puzzling, but what I loved about it and what I got out of it was, at that time, and that was 2 years ago, so it's evolved, right? But the idea that snackable content works, right? The idea that edutainment as a concept, because science, I mean, it goes over my head sometimes, and I work for a consumer pharma company, I'm like, this molecule does what? And so making it simple to understand, making it easy for consumers to appreciate, and making the content immersive and experiential helps with driving your sales and your product. So for me, while we walked away from the idea of live streaming because it was so early on in the forefront, I got a lot of benefit out of that particular initiative that we did. And so for me, test and learn is very important. I think e-commerce and direct to consumer, sometimes we get caught up in the lofty ambitions of where some of these technologies are taking us, but cut it up into bite-sized chunks, and through the experimentation, take what you can and learn from it, is how I typically use Web3 and the idea of like immersive content and educational content to figure out how I built my brands. So
I think that's such a great, rich example of using content to build a rich relationship.
within the context of Web3, Web 2.5, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Right. And so I guess my question is, like, how do you take the data that you gather as you build that
Yeah.
relationship and then leverage it to create personalized experiences, which is the next step and a step toward that utopia that Stephen was talking about?
Yeah, you identify the audiences. I mean, through that, you get a lot of rich data in their behavior. Zero-party data is important as well, so we worked with a company called Jabbit to kind of figure that out. And then through that, you know, working with our partners, working with someone like Stephen to help kind of mine the data and then build richer content, richer audiences that you can target.
Yeah, I think that's still, you know, we're just seeing the takeoff of connected data, right? So many data, right? We talk about the real-timeness. Today, you still have different walled garden, channel, silo, and then the new data you're going to capture. You still require, you know, to data stitch them together, enrich them together, because you got all the third-party data, and then you know exactly this is the same Stephen Moy. Just talked to you in Shanghai, and now I'm back to New York. And I think the new generation, we talk about it, I think that's a lot of new innovation will come along with generative AI doing that real-timeness. I still have not seen the connect data really doing real-time. It take days for the data warehouse to, you know, data enrichment process. I think new frontier, I would love to see more generative AI, you know, get the data real-time, and then through the customer journey, through the Omniverse, and doing real-time dynamic personalization. I think we're becoming.
Yeah, so I think that's important. So once again, I don't know if you guys have solved the eternal question on how to use data effectively, but I haven't, and my teams haven't, right? So I think we do our best to figure out what the right audience targeting is, how do you get to higher ROAS, right? All those stuff is very mathematical and extremely prescriptive, which helps us build larger audience databases. But I will never walk away from the qualitative, soft understanding of like your consumer and their emotional needs to be done. I think what we do is we try to mine the data to get to the right audience sizing. We try to make sure we do testing and learning and targeting to identify the efficiencies. But the engagement piece is very important, and I don't think we've cracked the code on that yet. I'm trying to find engagement KPIs that can work as well for us as we do ROAS or efficiency data, right? So efficiency and engagement is super important. I think data helps me identify and solve for a lot of the efficiency metrics. I've not figured out how to truly solve for engagement metrics just yet.
Well, the new foundation, we talk about connected data, right? The next tier up is connecting your ecosystem together, right? You have your own MarTech, AgTech, and then your partner ecosystem. I think if you truly want to win in the Omniverse, you need to connect your ecosystem, like use technology like Feedonomics to link things together, call of, I'm a big fan. So to link the system together, so you have to have that. If not, we were just talking about based on some of the judging, like TikTok, right? That's in UK, when you go on TikTok, and then TikTok led into different touch points, let's say .com, didn't work out that well. Can you share the data?
Right, so the customer journey is complicated, right? Because sure, in an ideal world, somebody goes on TikTok and clicks and buys, and that's the whole transaction. But that's not the way that most people typically shop. They might see something on TikTok, they go on their phone, they go into a store, they go to the website when they're at work, and then they end up buying something on their phone on their commute home, or who knows? I mean, it's a very multifaceted journey, and connecting those dots is really complicated, right?
Right.
And so that gets to that connected commerce concept
Yes,
that you're
absolutely.
talking about. And so I guess to ground it from the 50,000 foot view is like, where do you begin to solve that very difficult puzzle?
Well, I think I would love to hear Claudine's perspective from a brand, right? First of all, you have to understand where your target audience, behavioral trait, you need to meet where they are. So you shared some of the stat with me. I was, wow, general public, 19% using TikTok as the first touch point. And then Gen Z, 43% use TikTok to discover product. So whatever you're selling, that's the first touch point. Even they take closer, 50%, that generation, 50% above Amazon and Google. Think about that. So you have to meet them where they are. So first of all, you need to know where they are. And then that's the first touch point of the first mile of your customer journey. You need to understand the ecosystem of touch point, including your website, your call center, if you have one, retail partner, create that cohesive experience. That's why you see a lot of people, the stat you told me about in UK, right? People didn't go through the whole journey and then just dropped off. And I think next wave could be in context shopping, could be interesting. But you are being judged by the younger generation about your brand every single touch point. So I'm sure you deal with that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just to pull out from what you were talking about just a moment ago, the data point that we were talking about is, let me find it. The average time that the US adult users spend on TikTok is 55.8 minutes a day. That's crazy. And then among, let me find it, among Gen Z, 18 to 24-year-olds, it's an hour and 19 minutes.
Wow.
And then the 25 to 34, the key demographic group who actually is spending a lot of money, 52 minutes. So understanding your audience, understanding where they are, how they're engaging is incredibly important.
I do think we should understand the barriers in which it closes the sale too, because I think TikTok, I've been using it a lot for insights, and for me, trying to understand where culture is moving. Haven't used it as much, to be honest, on the purchase cycle, just because I do think TikTok aids in the discovery, right, of how consumers then go and choose where they go and shop. And for me, that's why, to your point about the Omniverse, I think it's extremely important to connect what they're talking about, building experiences around the search and discovery of products, making sure then you connect it really well to your retailer strategy offline is super important. And for me, that's how I've been utilizing or trying to use TikTok in terms of what it does for my brands. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it gets to the point of
Everybody's
brand.
different. Every
Yes.
brand is different.
Every
for
brand
me,
is different.
For me, it's definitely different. I think maybe LVMH, for example, I can see how, consumers would go online or, to buy a bag, or Revolve, they would go online to buy a jacket. But I just think it's harder for brands that I work on.
Yeah, Zach, you told me, right, 43%, the younger generation do product discovery.
Discovery,
Any
yeah.
product
Yes.
discovery
Yeah,
at the TikTok.
43% of Gen Z
That-
start their search for products on TikTok.
Yeah, and consider that will be the first touch point getting to your Web3, Omniverse. And
I went to a restaurant yesterday.
Yes.
The one I told you about. like X-Pot in Chicago.
I should go
It was
to
a hot
that.
pot place, and they were like, "How did you discover us?" And I was like, I saw something on TikTok, and I was like, I have to try you guys out. You know, your Wagyu beef dipped in that soup looks really good. But I discovered, you know, what experience I wanted from TikTok, right? So
Yeah, so totally. But yeah, so I think, you know, if I have to, I talk to a lot of different category of leaders, right? From, you know, pharmaceutical to consumer electronic to skincare very natural. Even financial services. I did a podcast with Rocket Mortgage. Even they started using TikTok for some of their financial services product like credit card. Because that's how the younger generation, again, first touch point, I'm not suggesting that's the only touch point. That would be the first touch point for them to learn about financial wellness, about the product, is that credit card good fit for me? And then they will go into the rest of the Omniverse, like, you know, where to actually, whatever fit their needs. So I will encourage people to think about your customer journey, right, in and out, what touch point is important for your category. I work with some other category. The first touch point, not yet on TikTok. The first touch point is traditional digital marketing, SEO, SEM, display, and then website, which is okay. But don't forget, this generation with attention, we call it attention economy, you train for 8 seconds, they talk about your brand all the time. I think a lot of brands should be either hosting the conversation or allow them to join the conversation so you can learn more about what your customer is looking for. I think those are the things people should watch out.
hey, I'm just curious. Show of hands, how many people have used Lemonade? That's the sister company of TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Nobody? Because I'm just curious. Like, I feel like that news started trickling down 4 or 5 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when does it go from niche, like, to like something like a TikTok? It takes a long time, but I'm like, is this the right time for me to experiment with something like a Lemonade, or do I need to wait till like, you know, like when, right? It's kind of, I'm just curious. I probably you guys can't answer because, you know, it's a big audience here, but I'm just curious just because there's no show of hands on people using a platform like Lemonade.
I think that's such an interesting question, is how do you determine when is the moment to begin? Maybe you're not a first mover because that doesn't fit your brand, but maybe like a second mover, is that a term? I don't know, I'm saying it is. But you follow right on the heels of that first mover so that you're in position to capitalize when things start moving.
Yeah.
How do you make that decision?
I don't know. How do you make that decision? You know, I mean, like some of the brands I look at which has no relation to OTC, like Gucci, right? I think they do a lot of stuff that's really cool. That's in the forefront of tests and learns. But I can't look at a Gucci and go like, now it's time for me to use this tool, right? And so, I mean, there's some things that you know, and that's why part of the reason I'm here, because while I am talking to experts like yourself, I'm also trying to figure out how do I keep on the pulse of what's moving and when do I jump in?
So I think that's a great segue to my last question before we open it up for questions. And so I want to look into the future and like think about this time next year, this whole conversation about Web3, about the Omniverse, what sorts of actual results, what findings, case studies will we see, and how much like conjecture, how much speculation, how much test and learn sort of experimentation will we be still talking about? What do you think?
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. I think you will see another dimension added, the generative AI. I see a lot of use cases from data munching, data stitching, data enrichment to get into the real-time, near real-time in context personalization of key communication and also dry commerce. I think there's a role there. On the commerce front, I mean, we're not surprised, right? We have the AR, VR, and also chatbot in the past. I think there's some real-timeness, really talk about like product recommendation in a more creative and more data-rich way instead of just you want to extra fries to your order. And then I think that I always advise my client, my last complaint would be, a lot of people focus on customer acquisition, right? Selling more product and services to them. How about keeping your customer? I think that's a new dimension in the Web3 world with generative AI. How can you really turn your customer service rep or call center or whoever touch point your sales associate into more consultative, building relationship with your customer because you have more richer data and more personalization you can do.
Could we pause there for just one quick second? Because it's an area that I wanted to touch upon, and I just think we've kind of glossed over it. But could you just highlight how Web3 offers the promise of bolstering loyalty and retention?
Well, I think go back to the data, right? And the direct to consumer. Now you're having a direct conversation with your target audience that interacting with you all the time. And through that process, you should capture more zero and first party data that you own, right? It's like Claudine said, a lot of data just telling you what happened. You should capture the additional data to understand the why. Why they select your brand, why they keep coming back. You have to balance the emotional and functional needs. So the new customer data you capture, I think should be something, new foundation you need to build on a connected data set side.
Yeah, I like that. I think first, second, even sometimes third-party data would help you with the retention and loyalty strategies. I try not to get too caught up in I think it's important to understand trends and what's coming into the future and trends of technology. We were just having a conversation too, in terms of making sure you don't leave behind case studies as well or use cases that are doing well without a lot of help in technology. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We like to touch, feel, and experience things. I've been reading a lot on restoration hardware, for example, and what they've been doing in terms of not leveraging technology, but leveraging experiences to build their communities. And so I think there's a mix of both that we always need to tap into, right? I always like to hear and come to conferences where you talk about AI. I mean, in fact, I used an AI tool to write my own presentation recently in terms of how Rocky Balboa is a challenger brand. And Dollar General too, you know, so I think technology, we always need to stay in the forefront. I try to always also make sure that I learn from people that are not using technology just to be able to use technology better. So I think they're both good cases, but to your point, retention and loyalty, but also how do you just bring people in to your brand and what your brand stands for and what it means, you know?
I think that's such a good point. It's so easy to get focused on the next big thing and get caught up in it, but like there's the nuts and bolts of just like selling stuff that like you just need to nail down before you even look to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have time for a question?
Yeah, we have time for a question or two. Any questions? Or some last thoughts?
Oh, question.
Wait.
I see all this is great for the Gen X and the millennials, but what about the baby boomers and the people over 40? How are they interacting with, like me? How are they interacting with the technology?
Oh, well, great question. I recently actually was with the CMO of AARP, right? They talk about how you target marketing to the 50 plus. So I would go back to the touch point of ecosystem. You know the primetime TV viewership today? So you know what age? Primetime TV, like live broadcast TV, 55 years old. So the first touch point with TV commercial, still okay. So right, that would be the right first touch point, but also I will, like what we talk about, right? You have to think about the ecosystem of touch points. So that's still a value for that. And when I talk to the ARP CMO, the whole team, they also still doing mailing. Because again, those are the different, may not be technology-enabled touch point, but still a touch point of that ecosystem. So that's my humble opinion.
I usually, the 50 plus consumers, I use basic. I use search a lot, you know, with the right content because they're trying to keep up, you know, a big insight around it, right? They're trying to keep up. They're trying to make sure that they figure out how to stay relevant and they use tools that they know, but tools that they think is more advanced for them. And so search for me is a big, one of the bigger drivers that I use to drive conversion that way.
But it gets back to that same point, whether it's Gen Z and TikTok, it's knowing your audience, your specific audience. So you may have an audience of baby boomers, but they might be tech savvy, or they might just be watching primetime TV. It's about honing in on who the specific consumer base that you're trying to reach is,
Yeah.
right?
Awesome. All right, any last thoughts?
Well, I think we talk about a lot of technology. Sometimes a lot of innovation is not technology-led. Someone recently, I'm old enough to remember, one of the non-technology innovation in the 60s, zip code. We introduced zip code in a system. You know what happened? Now you have new form of community based on zip code, and then they launched the catalog businesses. So I will, to your point, like, it's not all about technology innovation. It's about how you know, humanize technology.
To my big thing, and I've been talking about talent recently, is at the end of the day, it's the people that use it, you know, whether you're a shopper, a consumer, or even in marketing and, you know, as the person that's driving the business. There needs to be, you need to start with people that have the curiosity to want to learn and experiment and figure out what the use case or what the problem you're trying to do to solve for, and then you test and learn your way in. But to do that, for me, it starts with the mindset of who uses it to begin with. So that's just.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Give them a round of applause.